But really the reason I'm here today and what I'd like to focus on is talking about some of the strategies and ways that we can captivate and market to the millennial customer. So there's a lot of conversation as consumer behavior shifts and millennials and Gen Zs move into their prime buying years. What does that mean for us as marketers? What does that mean for us as we try and build a brand and deliver products to the market? So quick overview of what I'm going to cover today. First is we're going to talk about those changes, what's actually happening out in the world today, how are real people changing the way they interact, both with each other, but also with brands. Second, we're going to introduce a couple of the ways and things that you as a marketer, you as a store owner, as someone trying to build and deliver a brand, can actually take that behavior and make it an asset as opposed to an obstacle. And then we'll talk about and show a couple examples of brands that are doing this really well. Alrighty, so just to kind of frame the problem and get everybody thinking, this isn't new news. I think we all are on our phones, we all are on our TVs and our computers. We're absolutely inundated with advertising. And so and this number is probably outdated because it's a 6-month-old figure, but we see about 2,500 advertisements per day. And the graph of ad recall is not getting any better. So if we think about the speed and rate of advertising getting inundated across nearly every channel, and that major decrease in recall, especially amongst millennials and Gen Zs, you got to kind of throw up your hands and say, what the heck can I do? How do I reach my audience? And so the big thing I want to make sure and be loud and clear about, your tool belt as a marketer is not being taken away. We just need to talk about the different tools and figure out how to re-equip yourself to be authentic, to grow, and to really captivate the audience that you're going and trying to reach. So the example I love to use, and I try and rotate industries, so rather than use an example of the industry that takes up and monopolizes your professional lives, I'm going to use a travel example, something that most of us in this room are consumers. And you think about your Instagram, think the magazines you read, the paper, the podcasts you listen to. See if you can recall and think about the last travel advertisement you saw, whether it was for a hotel or a destination. I'd say about some small percentage of you is actually going to remember that ad, that Sandals Jamaica, print magazine, that Facebook post you saw. And so if you can recall an ad, think about the emotion it drew. Did you really get that emotive reaction? Did you bookmark it? Did you text your buddy or your significant other and say, hey, we got to go here. I just saw this ad. Okay, so think about that. Table that emotion. And now think about how you interact online, on social media, with your friends. Everybody has that friend that you kind of wonder when they go to work because they're always on awesome adventures. They're always traveling. I have like 3 or 4 people in my head right now. Can you tell me a place that they've been recently? The answer is probably yes. You've probably texted them, texted your friend, forwarded that post, put it in an iPhone note of places you want to go, something. So that's word of mouth. It's just on steroids. And that influence that we have over each other is not new. I think that's really the origin of marketing. The reality is that community-driven branding, the impact that your customers and real people have over brand perception, over brand introduction and awareness, is a lot bigger deal. So that's what I'm going to focus on today, is those changes and some of the ways that we can really understand that as marketers and what we can do about it. So what's causing this shift? Really 4 key trends that I like to focus on and I think encapsulate the problem pretty well. The first being digital literacy. If we think about traditional advertising and the meetings you would have sat in 10, 20, 30 years ago, we talked about media consumption. We talked about traditional media and the different ways you market within those different channels. Today, it's not media consumption, it's social media consumption. And pictures aren't just art. They're not just portraying a high-level, fluffy brand lifestyle. They're actually a form of communication. So you look across everything from Snapchat and ephemeral messaging to Instagram, even to your text feed. I'm posting a picture half the time or a GIF in place of typing something out. So that digital literacy, the ability, and millennials and Gen Zs understanding of how to use these different channels, how to seek out an opinion and communicate at a much faster rate, is changing the pace and the style in which we as brands have to talk to our customers. The second being, I mentioned this a second ago, word of mouth on steroids. And word of mouth has always been the most powerful form of marketing. That's really not new. I think the funny thing, if we think about it, word of mouth for a long time was a literal term. And how many people do you talk to in a given day? I talk to maybe, my colleagues, a friend or two, and my fiance. So what is that, 15 people? So when I love something, a restaurant or a new product or a backpack, my ability to influence people was actually very small. So if I was a marketer, word of mouth was the byproduct of an entire marketing initiative, from awareness down through to conversion, and it was the byproduct of really good marketing. Today, word of mouth is actually part of really good marketing. Understanding that when you deliver a great experience, whether it's a product experience, whether it's a marketing experience, whether it's the ambassadors and influencers you use to shape and deliver your brand, the reverberation from that and the response, that word of mouth, is going to happen online. It's going to happen when one post about your brand is going to reach someone's entire community. So that word of mouth on steroids all of a sudden has made what was the bottom of the marketing funnel the very top. And marketing's gone from a linear funnel to really a wheel. And so I think that paradigm shift really needs to change the way we think, not just about marketing, but how marketing connects to the rest of the business. All of a sudden, having a great product has become one of your best marketing assets, and being able to tell those real customer stories at a much higher scale. Third is social shopping and discovery. And so the stat that I like to use here is a generation ago, when someone walked into a brick and mortar, a physical mall, they were 70% less likely to know what they were going to buy. So what does that mean? It means that the mall in and of itself was the discovery mechanism for products. That's very different from millennials and Gen Zs, because we've actually learned, we know how to self-educate. We have access to information, whether it's on social and peer reviews, whether it's review sites, whether it's just shopping on Instagram and following your favorite athletes or your favorite celebrities. You discover products much more deliberately and organically, and all of a sudden, I actually get to curate the media that I consume. So for you as a brand, understanding that, it changes the way that you want to deliver a product, what message you put where along that customer journey, and understanding that when someone comes to your website or when they walk into your store, they probably have a very different set of experiences with the product, knowledge, and background than they did a generation ago. And then third is brand loyalty. And so I think if you go read about millennials and Gen Zs and brand loyalty, you'll see wildly different perspectives. You'll hear that they're an incredibly fickle consumer base. You'll also hear that millennials are really, really loyal to the brands they love. I think the reality is both are probably true. And it comes down to not just the product, but making sure you're telling a real story and building a real lifestyle. Loyalty for millennials is not about the quality of the shirt. And I think that someone said to me once, Nike has never had an ad telling you that they make their shirts with the nicest polyester. Nike stands for something if you are a runner or an athlete, and every brand has that innate story that they want to tell, but bringing that farther up into the fold, making that a bigger piece of the way you interact with customers, is actually how you'll build loyalty amongst millennials. It's less about the product that you're delivering, and it's more about the story and the identification I'm making, the personal branding I'm making by choosing your product. So I think, where does that lead us? First and foremost is authenticity. This goes back to that digital literacy. We see a lot more context as a millennial or a Gen Z. The reading between the lines, that digital literacy, when you have a brand photo, your splash image, your hero, we're actually able to decipher a lot more than previous generations about who you are as a brand, what you stand for, and what that creative means. So you'll see a lot of stats here that you have to be authentic. And that authentic needs to be deliberate, but it also needs to be specific to your brand. So as a marketer, even if we're talking about search discoverability or paid advertising, always making sure we're not just focusing on the mechanics of marketing, but also that story that we need to push through the channel. So how do we make sure we're always authentic? That should not just be a creative burden on you as a marketer on coming up with new ways to be authentic. That in and of itself is not authentic. So what we at Pixlane, the way we've worked with a lot of our brands and seen success, is actually making marketing a two-way conversation. Instead of broadcast marketing, it's community-driven marketing. And what does that mean? It means that we've already talked about how your customers are oftentimes your best marketers. So understanding what message they're telling, and it may be the same message you're delivering in your brand advertising, it may be a wildly different one, or it may be another variant of. but really understanding that and figuring out how you can bring that into the fold, make your customers, their stories, and their voice a bigger piece of your marketing is really going to help when you try and connect with millennials and Gen Zs. So if we're going to be authentic, if we're going to be present in every channel, we understand the speed and the rate of marketing today. Where's the crunch? The crunch is around content. And I've never met a social or a digital or a brand marketing team that said they had enough content. And even if they had the budget to buy all the stock photos they needed or build in-house, making sure it's good content and it's really going to resonate is really hard to do. So that's really one of the first big crunches to overcoming a lot of these obstacles is how do I deliver this message consistently, uniquely, freshly, real time all the time in today. And the answer is content, but that's hard. And you think about whether it's with in-house creators, whether you have agencies, however you're creating content, it's just hard to keep up. And that's a big place at Pixely being a user-generated content platform where we start helping. Your customers are creating lots of content. Your ambassadors are creating lots of content, and so are your athletes. That content shouldn't just be a social media, an organic post. How do you actually figure out what segment of that content is a real powerful brand marketing asset, and then how do you put it into the brand experience? How do you get it into an advertisement or an email or onto your homepage? So I think when we talk around those customer stories, that user-generated content, it's one of the big opportunities available to you all in getting over that content hurdle and trying to find a way to have enough content that's going to resonate and is going to be authentic. So I'm now going to shift gears a little bit. That's the problem. That's what we're all seeing in the market. I'm going to talk about what I do at Pixely, how we help brands from a user-generated content standpoint. There's obviously a lot of ways and a lot of things we need to be doing to help connect with millennials and connect with Gen Zs. User-generated content, customer stories being one of those. So when we think around that authenticity, it comes back to the lifestyle. And lifestyles are built from real people. Obviously, there's a marketing element, but you need to make sure if you're going to promote a lifestyle, if you are going to identify your customers and your products around a larger, more thematic lifestyle, that it's actually true, that you actually have people out in the world that embody that story you're telling. And the best way to build trust and build proof is not just tell me something is true about your brand, actually show it taking place out in the real world. So that's where Pixely comes in. That's where we end up helping brands, lifestyle brands that have that conversation taking place online. They have customers posting, evangelize, talking about their products, helping make sure that the data behind those photos, the photos themselves, go from a social asset into an actual marketing asset, and figuring out the ways you can use this content, this data, and these stories to improve anything from a shopping cart abandonment email to product page conversion rates. So our platform, it really is a full-service user-generated content platform. So from understanding where and how customers are posting about your brand, finding that content, I think the biggest opportunity in social content is that there's a lot of it. The worst thing as well is there's a lot of it. So making sure that you actually have the tools in place to curate and discover that content and sift through the stuff that really isn't on brand. And then the second piece is actually being able to distribute it. Different from other types of mediums and media types, there's another set of hurdles with social content that comes from real customers. Making sure that you as a marketer are focusing on the use case, the story, and are able to distribute this content across every digital channel, and then starting to move in-store, digital signage, that sort of stuff. And then tracking. I think one of the best and the worst thing about digital and social is you can measure everything. So we talk about things like personalization. That's a lot of testing. Personalization is one big testing model. Once you have the data to understand your customers, you can't really have the personalization conversation if you don't talk about the other half of the equation. There's the data, and then there's really the content. If I spend a ton of time and money and energy learning about my customers, building my CRM, trying to track people from every device and every channel and connect those data points, but then I don't have the content or the creative to modify the experience based on that data, I really haven't done anything. So that's another place that user-generated content starts being a huge asset just because of the sheer scale. So if it is raining in New York City and someone is looking at my jacket's product page versus it is sunny in the Marin Headlands above San Francisco, that's a very different customer. I can't possibly have the creative to take every different permutation of that example and market to people differently without starting to use content from my customers, content from my ambassadors in things like a product page of an e-commerce website. So that's the challenge and the opportunity in one, and that's really how we spend our days helping brands. So this is a super messy slide. Goal of this slide is to really help you understand the ways marketers are starting to use customer stories and UGC across their marketing. You'll see everything from ad landing pages to in-store signage to mobile shopping apps. And I think that the big takeaway here is a lot of the conversation around customer stories from social still sit with the social media marketing team. And social really the best way to look at social today is less as one of your channels that you have to be present on and more as an overlay of everything you're doing. Social is consumer behavior, it's communication. So the worst thing brands can do is silo your social media marketing teams, is have them there, measure them on likes and followers and impressions, because that community that they are building, that they are helping to promote and evangelize, the content that's coming out of it is actually going to be some of your best creative assets, regardless of what activation we're talking around. So I just went through that. There's a lot of data that supports this content starting to really resonate with customers. It only helps by the fact that every time a new set of phones come out, these cameras are better and better. This content is really high quality. Often people are having a harder time telling the difference between professional creative and user-generated content. And even when they can tell, oftentimes the user-generated content is outperforming simply because it has that built-in peer trust, social proof, and brand validation by the very nature of it being a real customer telling a real story. So if we break down what I'm really saying around the value in this content in making this a bigger part of your marketing, there's three things you're going to see. The first is increasing the top line. This is the peer engine and gas to your marketing engine is how do you increase click-throughs? How do you drive conversion? How do you increase brand awareness? All those different places along that customer journey, there's going to be places where bringing your customers and those real stories into the centerfold is going to help you actually build that brand, resonate stronger, and move more product. The second is reducing costs. It's really hard to market at the speed you need to and at the scale and be everywhere all the time. So when we start thinking about the influence your customers can have and the ability and then scale they offer, you start really imagining a world where you can be fresh on every channel with the budget you currently have. And then third is that new insight. There's a lot to be learned about how your customers talk and engage with your brand online. And this isn't just a impression conversation. This is your post-purchase experience. And I think the industry we've understand what a 5-star review is. Text-based reviews that are solicited. Maybe it's part of your post-purchase email flow. But really having the tools and resources and committing yourself as a brand to understanding what's happening organically, not just so you can be reactive, but so you can actually lean in and participate. I think that's the big shift that we are telling and encouraging brands to make, is this isn't just about grading yourself, understanding, hey, we put these things out into the market, did it work? It's actually understanding the conversation so that you can modify what you're doing based on it. Folks may love your product for a different reason than you intended. That's actually a good thing. But as a brand, rather than trying to brute force and change that perception, first step is understanding, and second step is saying, how can I use that to change what I'm doing? Okay, so this is some of the data that we're actually seeing across our customer base. So like I said, we work with a lot of brands in the outdoor apparel and equipment, but also across most consumer verticals. So travel, fashion apparel, beauty, cosmetic. And what we're seeing is when brands are using these customer stories effectively, they're driving real results. And they're not just driving results from a conversion standpoint on a product page, they're really helping attack whatever the marketing goal is. So if the goal is to increase awareness and using this content and driving different forms of campaigns or user engagement opportunities, or at the very bottom of the funnel, trying to find ways to drive loyalty, the conversation around this content is becoming a bigger and bigger deal, and brands are starting to see a lot of success. So I'm going to go through 4 really quick examples, and then I'm happy to take some questions of a couple brands that are doing this really well. So the first being Fjallraven, and they have prioritized user-generated content as a part of their e-commerce experience. So if you go to their website, anything from right off the get-go on their homepage or on their different lookbooks and inspiration galleries, they're actually featuring real content that's been merchandised against their product catalog, but that comes from real customers, from their ambassadors, and from their athletes. So it's a more organic way to help your shoppers discover product. I think one of the other really powerful things about using user-generated content at the top of the funnel when you're trying to drive that product discovery is it actually mirrors the way millennials and Gen Zs are discovering product organically. So much of your traffic is coming from mobile, it's coming from social. The really abrupt experience change from scrolling through an Instagram feed, as an example, to dropping onto a full e-commerce website, oftentimes bounces. I mean, what's the industry standard? It's 60, 70% bounce rates. So using that social content is helping bridge that gap. But as you'll see, as you navigate the Fjallraven website, they use this content all the way through the shopping experience, from a product page all the way to that discovery. And then even after you check out, how are you going to get customers to buy again? How are you going to be able to show them, folks that bought this backpack, they're also wearing these other 2 products from Fjallraven. I'm going to show you real people that took a hike and have all 3 sets of equipment on, and I'm going to merchandise the social content against my product catalog so that I can create both a great branding opportunity, but also a commerce opportunity. So we're starting to blur the lines between content, commerce, and community in a way that millennials and Gen Zs are starting to expect. Second is Breckenridge. This is actually one of my favorite examples. The goal was digital ads were getting sterile and getting stale, and the conversation was, how do we spice it up? We can hire a new creative agency, we can bring in a fresh set of content, or we can get creative because we're trying to drive people to buy tickets. We're trying to get people to the mountain. Well, we had 4 inches of powder last night, and people are posting photos from yesterday's afternoon. Can I get that real content from real people on the chairlift and get it into an ad unit in time to be real time, be contextual, and be relevant to the folks on Friday afternoon are figuring out whether they're going to ski or not. So what Breckenridge was able to do was get those real social content into an ad unit in real time and drive click-through on a very, very quick turnaround. And what they actually noticed was that user-generated content was outperforming their professional content by about 35%. Ultimate Ears, which is a wireless speaker company that has been building roots in the music industry and in the outdoor industry over the past couple years. They're owned by Logitech, so they originally took the new branding initiative with a big company approach, trying to figure out what large influencers, what big splashy brand takeovers they were going to build, and where they actually ended up was they decided to skip about the first 10 steps in bringing a new brand to market, and rather than telling their audience and the folks they were trying to reach what they stood for, they went out and found real people that were already embodying that story. And to be fair, it was a small subset of the conversation about their brand was what they wanted it to be. You know, people were talking about the speakers for any number of reasons, but as they moved into the music and outdoor lifestyle, they went and found the real people. And we're not even talking micro-influencers, we're talking real customers telling real stories, and made them the focal point and the signature of this campaign. So they both, one, saved a ton of money and got to market much quicker. You know, this was a seasonal campaign that they were able to get to market in a week as opposed to a quarter of planning and huge content development cycles. But at the same time, it really performed. And to this day, if you start seeing how people forget the brand used to really not embody those couple lifestyles. And that happened over the course of about 2 years, which for a big brand is quite fast. And then the third one, and then I'm happy to take a few questions, is Whistler. And this is a conversation around brand perception. So this is at the very top of the funnel. Everybody understands Whistler Blackcomb as a winter destination. When they came to us, the conversation was not how do I continue to build that half of my business. It was nobody looks at us as an evergreen 365-day-a-year destination. And so they went through a similar process just without the influencer side, but they had to build that activity, those impressions, and start the conversation around their property, their destination as a summer activity. So they did a ton of partnering with actually a lot of brands that are here today, and summer products, summer sports, and found ways for consumers to actually participate in the campaign. So this was, at its simplest, this was photo contests, fans of the day, and experiential storytelling marketing, but they kept it running for the entire season. So if I was gonna go enjoy Whistler, and I in any way embodied or resonated the brands that had also partnered on this campaign, I had a really easy way to engage and participate with the campaign. So that's the other really nice thing. If we talk about this content as a form of communication, then it has to be two ways. Conversations are two ways. So not just taking what's being organically put out there into the internet, but making it really easy and communicating with your audience that you want to see their content. You want to see their photos. You understand their value. You understand it's a conversation, and you think it's part of yourself as a brand. So that building that in, making sure even simple things, like when you send a post-purchase email receipt, ask them how it looked. Ask for a picture of the first hike they took with your product. That dialogue will start to build, and we'll start to see not just engagement and impressions, but content coming in that actually is embodying the story that you're trying to build. So that was another example. Went through it real quick. Those are 4 examples. I'm happy to go through more, but if there's 3 real things I want to make sure everyone takes away from today, the first being that you got to be authentic and personal, and you got to make sure every touch point, whether it's the types of marketing that you don't always consider authentic and personal, like an advertisement, always run it through the filter and say, am I telling my brand story? Am I being authentic? Is a millennial or a Gen Z going to be able to see through the marketing tactic? 2 is embrace the storytelling power of your customers. Understand that it's not a bad thing, but your customers have a huge impact over how your brand's going to be perceived, over introducing new audiences to your brand and to your products, and lean into that as opposed to finding ways to broadcast and drown out that noise. And then 3rd, one of the tactics, obviously where I spend most of my day at Pixely, but one of the ways that you can start doing this and can accelerate your ability to be authentic and tell that story is start you making the content and the conversations your customers are creating online and bring them into the brand experience. So whether that's in an advertisement or a website or in your store, having digital signage, start looking at the content your customers are creating as a marketing asset and not just customer feedback. So that's all I got. Thank you. Thank you all for the time. I can do a couple questions. Yeah? Yeah.
There's a quick note on there, you picking influencers. How do you guys define influencer, micro-influencer to kind of the notch below that?
So I guess that's a good point. So part of Pixely, we also, as we've built our platform, initially it was all around making the content your customers create into an asset as a marketer. The second half of that is there's real people behind these photos. The people talking about your brand, I think 95% of your word of mouth is going to come from 5% of your customers. So another thing that we do is help brands understand those people posting. So there's obviously a set of ambassadors and influencers that you as a brand have already identified because they embody that lifestyle, that message you're trying to communicate. One of the other big things we will do in our platform is start understanding whether it's the type of content, the sentiment around the photos, thematically going in and using image recognition to figure out what's in the photos, and start making recommendations and identifying other opportunities for either micro-influencers or large-scale influencers that are similar in the type of content that works. So that comes back to the really cool data loop and feedback loop that we're able to give our customers is, yes, we understand what people are posting organically online about your brand, but then we also understand what type of content works when you put it in a brand context. So understanding, hey, everyone is posting top-down shots with jeans of my Converse shoes, but then lifestyle pulled back images that are outdoors are actually driving the highest conversion rates on that same Chuck Taylor product page. And that loop, an insight like that, we're able to then overlay and go out into the world and find more content similar to what worked. So most of it will go over my head, quite honestly, but it's a combination of machine learning and artificial intelligence, but also the inputs we're getting from you as a brand and then performance across your different marketing channels. So it's a recommendation engine. Yeah.
Could you define micro-influencers versus macro-influencers?
It's a good question, and I think it's going to vary by brand. So I think the wrong thing to do is go throw a follower number on the definition. You'll see brands working with, and honestly, a lot of it is scale. Really expensive influencers cost a lot more. That doesn't mean they convert higher. So I would say the term micro-influencers right now is folks that are influencing more than their personal network. So if I'm a micro-influencer around skiing, that means that some portion of my audience is actually opting in and communicating with me online because of my thought leadership or understanding of the sport, and not just because of that personal relationship. So I think that would be the influencer threshold. And then what was defined as a micro-influencer versus macro-influencer isn't a term, but would vary a lot on the scale of your brand, the amount of investment you're going to put into those partnerships. So I think that's a wishy-washy answer, but I would say the other big thing that in my mind that differentiates a micro-influencer from an influencer oftentimes is the compensation. I think the great thing about a lot of micro-influencers is they can be more organic, more authentic, because you're actually interacting and making them a part of your brand because they already have evangelized and advocated for it. So finding those maybe smaller scale from a following perspective, but much higher relevancy to you as a brand is kind of the scale, if that gives you kind of an answer.
Yep, makes sense.
Got any more? Excellent. Well, enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you all for the time.